Hello, and welcome to my show, Searching for Integrity. My name really is John Smith, and I'm searching for people with integrity. And I'm searching for people with integrity. Why? Because our country suffers from IDD, integrity deficit disorder. We have a grand visitor today, where our guest, Julie Rogers Pomilia, and welcome. Come on in.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I've already ordered the book. When I started seeing all the pictures,
I'm so glad. Yeah,
I did. I started all the books, and this is really interesting to me. Of course, this was when I was I don't know, 6 or 7, 8 or 9 when this came along.
hmm
And I remember my parents couldn't peel me off the TV.
yeah,
But it's
it was a different day.
very much so. I had this in my head, and it helps the integrity part. But I remember, and I'm going to call him Roy for this interview. Okay, Mr. Roy.
No,
And,
you can call him Roy. He liked to be called Roy.
Okay, we'll do Roy.
He hated to be called. He said, "Just don't call me Mr. Rogers."
That's right. There was another Rogers coming along he didn't know about.
That's right. Yeah.
So I began looking and thinking in certain scenes that were there, and it seemed like there were like 30-hour segments on the TV, and they were looking for, I guess it was something. He said all the bad guys. He always got the bad guys some way or another. And
Yep.
and in getting that and doing that, it was a perfect fit for him to conclude with something about something that he had to do, or they shouldn't have done that, or whatever. That's
Yep.
the mission. That's the mission that we're after. And
There was always a moral. There was always a moral to the story type thing.
Exactly. And I don't know, not you, but I'm getting chills. Only fading back in that.
Yeah, I sometimes when I'm flipping around channels, I'll see his show, and I just like looking at it for nostalgia's sake, because it's really fun to see moving, alive, talking, video of your grandparents. Because back then, I mean, I don't even have that of my parents, because obviously they weren't on TV. But not many people have that, to be able to see them talking, walking, breathing, interacting with people. And it just brings me back to a different day. So I suppose I like watching his show for a little bit different reason, but nonetheless, I really enjoy those old shows.
Absolutely. Now, who is this?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's me. And it was a few years ago. Yeah, I've been singing and representing them for a while.
Absolutely. But I also think you had some fun with that too.
I did. I have had a lot of fun, and I never get tired of people's stories about them. People say, "Oh, I'm sure you've heard it millions of times before," and I always say it doesn't matter. It makes me feel good. It makes my heart happy to hear these things. So Go right ahead.
It's wonderful. Um, now, a
Yeah.
couple of the people in the one, of course, was Gabby Hayes,
Hmm.
and the other one, I believe, was Andy Devine.
Andy Devine was in,
Yeah.
yeah, he was in some.
And
Pat Brady
some.
was in the later ones. Hmm.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
But Gabby Hayes was not at all like his character in real life. He was like an English gentleman. He had been schooled in Britain in very formal acting. He wore his hair slicked back. He drove a Jaguar. He wore tweed suits, and he had teeth. And he was not anything like Gabby. He'd go to set, put on old clothes, mess up his hair, and take his teeth out, and he was ready to go. So for a kid, it seemed like he was two different people.
yes,
So.
yes. That's certainly a way for people
Mhm.
to remember you. And I guess he had some pretty good parts in that.
Yeah.
I, I'm a table of contents freak.
Really?
I really. That's because
So
I
why?
why? Because it tells me the story all the way through.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh. And
I can see that.
yeah, yeah. For instance, I've got a printout here. And the first one obviously was, who were Roy Rogers and Dale Evans? Of
Yep.
course, I
Yep.
know
Well,
now.
I actually, when I started writing the book, my first chapter was, I'd like a Grampy, please. Because it started with us and our young son ordering, a Roy Rogers drink. But then I started talking to my publisher and started thinking about it more. And I thought, some people are going to be picking up this book and they're not going to know as much about who Roy and Dale are.
Right.
And maybe I should, or the children, like the family. So maybe I should kind of preface the book with adding those two chapters in. So I added those at the last minute. Who were Roy and Dale? And then, will the real child please stand up? Because people are always asking, now, wait a minute. Which one was your father? And how was it?
Right.
So those two were kind of written in more of a biographical style, not so much a conversational style like the rest of the book. Which is kind of weird because I wanted it to start off conversational with, I'd like a Grampy, please. But I think those two chapters are important to kind of orientate the reader as to what we're talking about.
Absolutely. I'm with you all the way on
Yeah.
that one. And it
Yeah.
it kind of gets your heels dug in, and they want some more. Now let's see. Will the real child please stand up?
Yeah, our family is very diverse, and we never paid any attention to who was from what parent, who was adopted, who was foster, it just didn't make any difference in our family at all. And yet people always want to know, and it's very confusing family. So nobody is related. Only two of the siblings are related to each other biologically. Everybody else, nobody's blood related to anybody, but they're still family. They're all family to all of us. Everybody is. And my dad is the only biological son of Dale, and my Uncle Dusty and Aunt Linda Lou are the only biological children of Grandpa, and the rest are adopted. I have an aunt that is Choctaw Native American. I have an aunt that was from Korea. I have an aunt that was from Scotland. I had an uncle that had special needs because he had been beaten badly as a child and had mild brain damage and a broken nose when they adopted him. So we had lots of love in our family, lots of understanding, and very diverse, and culture and any of that other stuff didn't really matter. And it mattered in that my grandparents wanted them to be proud of their heritage wherever they came from. But we didn't, there was no racism, as you call it today, in our family. Right. So people can look at me and I'm totally Caucasian and they think, oh, you probably know nothing about, diversity. And it's like, oh, let me tell you, I grew up in a family of diversity. So yeah.
What's the total of the children, grandchildren?
Well, they had 9 children. 5 of those were adopted. And then we had 16 grandchildren. 1 has passed, so we have 15. And then there are 30 something great grandchildren, and now there's great. So it's gotten out of hand, and I don't even know the total number now. So lots of love, though.
Right. Let's see. One thing I didn't get through the computer was who's on the cover?
Oh, that's me.
Okay. I didn't see
that's
it.
Me with my horse at home, Sonny.
Uh-huh.
I had to talk to him so he didn't get a big head about all of this stuff. He was starting to get a little demanding, wanting certain, feed in his trough and wanting, the air conditioning to be at a certain temperature. And I said, no, you're just, don't think too highly of yourself there, Sonny. You're just still a horse. And, so yeah, that was in my backyard. And then Grandma and Grandpa are on the cover of the, the real stuff. I was going to name it Real to Real, like REEL to REAL. Then I looked up on Amazon and saw how many books are entitled Real to Real. And there were a lot. So I went a different direction.
What happens on Friday nights at the ranch? Big time?
Oh,
Have
my
a good
goodness.
time?
Oh, we had the best time. It was always chaotic and fun and just so warm and inviting. The whole house smelled like dinner cooking, and kids were running around, and aunts and uncles. I felt so safe there, and my life was so perfect at the time. And I felt that back then. I remember feeling that the ranch was magical to me. It was my happy place. And there were so many little nooks and crannies and spaces to explore. They had 300 acres, and they did a lot of filming on their own land, just right out their back door. And they had horses and cows and guinea fowl and pigs and sheep and chickens, and just so many places to play hide and seek. There was just no end to the fun, and none of us had cell phones, so nobody was on a screen, and we just had the best time ever, every weekend.
Well, you nailed it in chapter 6, My Happy Place.
Yep, that's exactly right. I used to love going in their closets and exploring all of their rhinestoned, leather fringed outfits that they would wear, their show clothes. And I'd turn on the light and all the colors would go on the ceiling and dance around. I'd stick my arm in the sleeves, and it was like this happy place, you just went and it was magic. So
Mama Dale and Daddy Roy.
Oh my, the 3 of us girls, I have 2 older sisters. We were the only ones that called them Mama Dale and Daddy Roy. And I never knew why, because my sisters are much older than me, and me and all the rest of the grandchildren. So when my sisters were born, my grandma was only 35, and she really didn't want to be called grandma quite yet, because she was very, glamorous and whatever. So there was a little bit of her that didn't want to be called grandma yet. And my sisters were the same age as the kids that they were adopting. So my aunts and uncles, some of them are my sister's ages. They're like more like cousins. But anyhow, my grandma suggested that my sisters call them Mama Dale and Daddy Roy. And so that was fine. But then I came along and all the rest of my cousins and everybody else by that time was calling them Grandma and Grandpa. But I was in the family that was calling them Mama Dale and Daddy Roy. So I just said that. And all of a sudden, pretty soon I started feeling really strange. Like, why do we have to call them that? And everybody else is just calling them Grandma and Grandpa. And I never got an answer. I mean, nobody would answer me. And I just thought it was so strange. So I thought, well, forget this. I'm just going to call them Grandma and Grandpa. And so I did. And years later, I found out the whole story behind that. And I'm not quite sure why they didn't tell me at the time, because I would have understood, I think. But they made it such a mystery that I thought, okay, this is weird. So, but he signed it on one of the pages in the book. It has my little autograph dog from my birthday that they gave me, and they signed it on there with the rest of my family. And he signed it Daddy Roy on that little autograph dog of mine.
Right.
So fun.
I'm on I'm in line for a book.
I'm so happy.
Yeah, they're going to start dispensing, I guess, in the coming week. So you better get your copy ready. Here's something here that I thought was interesting: Trigger and Buttermilk.
Oh yeah, yeah. Trigger and Buttermilk were very different. Trigger was everything you thought he was. Buttermilk, not so much. But Trigger was a great horse. When we were on him, Grandpa would put us on Trigger, and he was such a great horse. He just knew, you just sensed that he knew there was a child on his back and that he needed to be very careful and move very slowly. And he was such a nice horse and very smart. Grandpa and him had a bond like no one else had with that horse.
Right.
And there were some other Triggers in the wings to, as backups, but none were like the old man. He called, Trigger was fondly known as the old man when he got in his later years, and they would talk about the old man. And that's the Trigger that I knew. But Buttermilk, however, he had an attitude, and, he was abused as a young horse, which is sad. And he was actually on a trailer going to the slaughterhouse when they picked him off the truck and a few of the other horses and brought them to Hudkins stables where they would rent out horses for the movie industry. So he got saved by, at the last minute on the way to being killed. And when he got there, he was real sour, just didn't have a great personality and very stubborn. And he was a hard horse to handle. And when they gave him to Grandma, that really showed up clearly because she didn't know how to ride a horse to begin with. So he was a lot for her to handle. And she didn't do real well at first, but she kind of grew into it. They picked Buttermilk because of his coloring was so good against Triggers. They had her on a Palomino at first, and they said, no, that doesn't work because the two horses look too much alike. And Buttermilk, having a dark mane and a gray body, he showed up really nicely next to Trigger. So they chose him. But Grandpa said, I've never seen so much blue sky between a woman's rear end and a horse in my life when she trotted off that first day on set. And he thought, wow, it's going to be a long haul for this one. So she took some lessons, and by the time they finished their show, she was a pretty decent rider,
That's good. Let's see. How about The Man in Red?
Oh my goodness. He was just a mystery to me. I was enthralled with him whenever he'd come around. His name was Frank Millard. And in the 50s, 60s, he had a used luxury car dealership in the valley in the LA basin there. And he sold Aston Martins and Jaguars and, every other kind of high-end car. and Grandpa was in business with him for a while. So he'd come around the house, and his whole shtick was, instead of being called Frank Millard, he was known as the Man in Red, because he wore from head to toe, red shirt, tie, shoes, socks, rings, whatever. He had a dog he dyed red, and then he had a red car that he would drive. So when he'd come around, I would stop what I was playing with, and I would just be mesmerized by this guy. And he was interesting. Grandpa got one of those aqua cars that, is a car, but then you drive it into the water and it becomes a boat. And he took us out on that one time. He got that from him. And Grandpa was into a lot of different things, usually outdoor sports, lots of outdoor sports. And he really had an affinity for cars. He really liked interesting, unique, and high-end cars.
Well, that's appropriate, I would think.
Yeah, he really. What's that?
I was going to ask you about Grandma on a lily pad.
Oh, they were always doing shows, different appearances and this and that. And she was asked to go to Marine Land of the Pacific, which is now no longer. It used to be out in Palos Verdes on the peninsula out there. It was like a SeaWorld kind of venue. And so she did a show in the lagoon there where she was wearing a pink bathing suit, and she was on this giant lily pad, and she was singing. They had her all mic'd up and everything. And she had synchronized swimmers that were mermaids swimming around her. And so my dad woke up one Saturday morning and said, "Girls, we're going to Marine Land because Grandma's, singing there." And so we went, and it didn't even faze me that she was out there on a lily pad. That was just, I figured, okay, well, that's what grandmas do. And we watched her show, and I was really more excited about getting a little dolphin stuffed animal and some popcorn later.
Of course.
But it was fun watching her. I just, I didn't have a grandma that baked cookies and stayed home, but I guess I was kind of the only one in my grade that could say I went and watched my grandma singing on a lily pad in her bathing suit.
Where are the apples?
Oh, when they moved from Chatsworth, it was devastating to the family because, 3 of their kids had died. It was a really hard time, and Trigger had died. And actually 2 of their kids had died, and when they moved to Apple Valley, the 3rd one died. But he had to just get out of there because there were so many memories. Get out of Chatsworth, which was in the valley. That beautiful ranch I've just been talking about that I loved so much. And they moved up to the high desert. The doctor said it would be good, the fresh air, for asthma or whatever they had. So they moved up to Apple Valley, and I was picturing that it was green hills and lots of apple trees. Not even close to what that is. It's sand and high winds and cactus and sagebrush, tumbleweeds. It was very disappointing to move to visit them the first time because we all missed Chatsworth so much. But he really, especially Grandpa, had to really just get out of there because it was too hard with all the memories of Debbie who had just died. So they lived there then for 20 years. Grandma did not like it, but she grew to, appreciate it. And she traveled a lot. So, yeah. That was Apple Valley. It still is like that. And the house is still there. It was a very strange house. It was laid out kind of different. And, but, we all adjusted and life went on. And that's where they passed away, actually. We were with them when they passed in that house.
Really?
Actually, not that particular house. My Uncle Dusty built them a new house several years later after they moved up there, a house on the golf course, and it was a much nicer house. but they were still in Apple Valley. So they passed away in Apple Valley.
Did you make a Scotland trip? Scotland?
Yes, she came with us. She came with us. Mimi, my Aunt Mimi from Scotland, her guardian was the chief constable of Scotland Yard. And he invited us to come over there and visit. So we did, and Grandma went with us. And my best friend at the time, Sherilyn, and we went on this Scotland trip. And wow, it was quite a trip. My dad rented the tiniest car on the planet, I think. And there were 5 of us all squeezed into this little compact car with a suitcase on our laps. And we saw the countryside of Scotland. And we ended up in Edinburgh, where the Merrileys lived. The Merrileys, he was the chief constable there. And we went to the military tattoo up on the hill at the castle. And it's basically a show of bagpipers and dancing. And we sat in his private box with him and watched that. But
I think Julie's network went off. Okay, she's back.
okay, am I still here?
Yes, he says you're
Good.
back.
Okay, good. Yeah, she was a really funny person to travel with because she was very much a backseat driver, and she'd be jamming on the brake in the back seat, the imaginary brake, and grabbing onto my shoulder because I was in the middle. I'd be going, Grandma, you're hurting me. Stop. Tom, gonna use those brakes, and he's driving on the other side of the road, obviously. And so it was a very interesting trip. It was fun, very fun with her.
I can imagine. The Scots,
Yeah.
they're awful. They're good people. I'm from Scottish lineage. My wife is same, and her father was born in Edinburgh.
Oh, so have you been there?
No, I haven't been there, but I'm waiting. I'm going to retire some more, save up a little money, and then take off for it.
That sounds like a good plan. It's
Yeah,
beautiful
it is.
country over there. Really nice people too.
I got to get a hold of Coach, my best friend. He lives down in Hemet. His name is Coach. He's Coach. We coached the little guys in football, which was a lot of fun. Now, I want to ask you if you would be kind enough, and I think that you will, to direct my audience, the listeners, of where to go to buy your book.
You can go on Amazon. It's on Amazon in both hardback and paperback. And it's also on the Barnes & Noble website. And I am in the process of putting up my own website called info@julierogerspomilia.com. And I would like to be able to have books on hand that if people want them signed, I can send them back to them and just have a little site with pictures and trivia and this and that, but it's not up and running yet, but I'm working on that. So, but Amazon's probably the easiest place for people to go to get it.
Right. Well, like I said, I'm waiting on my picture book.
There's lots of pictures in it, and they had to turn down 125 pictures that I couldn't fit in there. So
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I have had a wonderful time talking to you today.
It has been fun.
It has been bringing back some old activities. And I missed one. What's the swap meet?
Oh, Grandpa and I used to go to the swap meet together when I was in college, and I'd go out to their house on the weekends. And he would put his baseball hat on way down over his eyes and his tennis shoes and try to look so unlike Roy Rogers so people wouldn't recognize him. And then he'd give me some bills and have me go up and barter and get whatever it was he wanted. And it was our little game. we had a lot of fun doing it. And, but we'd always bring our stuff home, and Grandma would look at both of us and say, out in the garage. I don't know where you're going to fit that in the house. You better take it out in the garage. And Grandpa would roll his eyes and say, I told you.
That's
They
the
had
way
a
my
really
wife
cute
is.
relationship. Yep.
I'll go in for everything.
So, yep.
Well, I want to thank my listeners and how to find you. And thank you for coming on and being part of your book with pictures. That's always a special time. At least it is for me. And glad to see that tuning in for searching for integrity. And so long and happy trails to all.